and we're going to talk to Matthew in Houston.
Hello.
Hi.
Real quick. Hey, how are you guys doing?
Good.
I was just wondering, what kind of epistemology John Loftus uses when he assesses evidence for Christianity?
Well, if you want to talk about empiricism versus rationalism or rational empiricism and what that might entail, you can ask somebody brighter than I am on
hey,
that.
I'm right here. No, just kidding.
I did, however, do a lot of research in those areas when I was in seminary and in my PhD program, but that was like 20 years ago. What I would rather do is just simply say, where's the evidence for the resurrection? Where's the evidence for the virgin birth? Where's the evidence for people levitating off of the ground? Is that fair? Do I have to know about those sorts of things in order to say I don't see the evidence for that?
No, yeah. If you don't see it, you don't see it. But when you're presented with evidence, quote unquote evidence, I guess you could say, is there certain types of evidence that you think are inferior to other kinds?
Yeah. The worst kind of evidence is negative evidence. Negative evidence is the lack of an explanation for a phenomena. For instance, it's considered evidence by Christians that there is a creator whenever there's a gap where science can't explain. That's the worst kind of evidence. In fact, it's no evidence at all. It's to say, okay, we can't explain this, so therefore God. And then what they do is they insert their God, Yahweh, not Allah, apparently, and not the Hindu God or some other God, and certainly not a dead religion's God, because dead religion's God, they must have died for a reason. You see, they didn't just all of a sudden die for no reason at all. So
you never know. Maybe one of those religions is right, and now nobody knows the true nature of God.
I hope I didn't offend you, sir. But that's the way I think about that.
So, you're kind of privy towards empirical, repeatable kind of evidences, and there's really no other kind, you think?
Well, no, I'm not opposed to rationalism. I think there's some. I've seen some philosophers argue on behalf of rationalism, but I think rationalism is basically it's just too religious for me. It's too supernaturalistic for me to think that all is reason.
Yeah, so when it comes to quality of different kinds of evidence, there are different fields that approach evidence in different ways. For instance, a scientist might have some very specific and extremely high standards for concluding that something is true. There's also legal standards of evidence, which tend to be a lot more circumstantial. I mean, if you find a bloody knife next to a victim with some fingerprints all over it, technically it doesn't prove that the guy whose fingerprints it is actually committed a murder, but the evidence can be more or less solid based on the level of detail that it approaches. One of the things that happened in American law specifically a long time ago was that after the Salem witch trials, there was this long discussion about whether spectral evidence could be allowed. Basically, people saying that they experienced supernatural things like in a dream, and whereas that spectral evidence used to be considered sufficient reason for indicting someone for the crime of witchcraft, now we don't take it seriously at all. Our legal system has absolutely no use for people giving unverifiable supernatural testimony. Now, does that mean that supernatural things could not happen? No, it doesn't mean that in a broad sense, but it also means that because you can't expect two people to experience those things the same way, it's our policy not to convict people based on something where the evidence is that subjective. And so that's what we mean when we talk about whether a claim is more or less extraordinary. Let's say.
Another kind of evidence that I think is poor is intersubjectivity evidence. That is feelings. You have a warm, bosoming, feeling in your inside, and so you think, well, that's God. What that is simply a good, warm feeling. It's not anything else but a good warm feeling. A warm feeling is a warm feeling is a warm feeling.
And I'm all for warm feelings. Sure.
A subjective experience is no more evidence for anything else but that you had a subjective experience. There's nothing objective about it. That's why it's called a subjective experience. And I don't buy it. And since so many people have these subjective feelings that they've experienced God, and these gods are all different, and they all have different commands, and they all have different scriptures, they're notoriously unreliable. Just as Mama and her on her knees is notoriously unreliable to get at the truth about religion and which one is true if there is one.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's a difference between being justified and having evidence for something, or being justified and something being true? Like, could you have justified false beliefs?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
You can't have.
I think John and I are going to duke it out now.
You can't have rationally justified false beliefs. No.
Well, I mean, it depends
That's
on.
what he means. That's what he means.
It depends, because I wouldn't say that something can be justified but not be absolutely perfectly justified, which I think, like all
Degrees of
all
evidence.
the things that we experience
Degrees of
are kind of
probability.
subjective.
Degrees of probability, right?
Right.
High
yeah.
five.
Okay.
All right.
So you can have a great deal of confidence in something. You can have a 95% certainty that something is going to happen, but it could still not happen because that 5% is not 0%. And I think that people sometimes don't appreciate that about probability and just assume that a 95% means, yeah, it's true.
But you should always go with the probabilities, even if they end up being wrong.
I agree with you there. So we'll do another high five later.
Okay. Do you think the person?
Yeah.
with
Okay.
The,
All right. Fine.
Do I
we
gotta
get
go?
it.
I'm sorry.
Well,
Do you
actually,
think the person with the warm? Oh, sorry. My bad.
we're about out of time. So if you want to
No
do
problem.
a concluding thought.
No, it's just I appreciate talking to you guys. I was about to get into justification and epistemology. I like it a lot. Nice talking with you guys, though. Have a good day.
I totally invite you to call back next week. I look forward to, or maybe Matt looks forward to having more of this conversation with you.
Just look up the
Yes.
Getier's paradox, and then you look into the idea of rational justification, and you probably already are aware of it. The Getier's paradox.
Okay.
That's it.